Welcome back, Focus Learners. Let's get right into today's explainer, because we are on a mission to decode the actual reality of corporate leadership. If you've ever tried to pin down exactly what makes a great manager tick, it honestly feels like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands, right? It's just this complex, multifaceted job that totally defies simple explanation. But today, we're stripping away all that corporate jargon and mystery. We're looking at one of the absolute foundational theories in management science to break down a taxonomy that's going to completely change how you view leadership, giving you a step-by-step framework to master the chaos.
So, let's start with a delightfully simple question. What do managers actually do? We all have this grand expectation of leadership, don't we? You probably picture someone sitting in this pristine, quiet corner office, staring thoughtfully out a window, and occasionally handing down some massive visionary strategy. But as you've probably guessed, that expectation almost never matches reality. The actual, on-the-ground reality of management is chaotic. It's fast-paced. It's highly reactive. A modern manager is switching tasks literally hundreds of times a day, dealing with constant interruptions and putting out fires left and right. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we take the messy, everyday reality of being a boss and actually make sense of it so we can improve it?
Okay, let's dive into this. To make sense of all that chaos, we need a taxonomy. Now think of a taxonomy as a classification system, a way to categorize really complex concepts into a structured reality. We hear this word in biology all the time, categorizing plants and animals into distinct families. But it is incredibly powerful in management theory too. By applying a taxonomy to leadership, we're basically elevating management from this mystical, dark art form into a rigorous science. We're saying that this incredibly complex, nebulous thing called leadership can actually be neatly categorized, studied, and ultimately mastered.
And that brings us to the architect of this incredible structure, management theory expert Henry Mintzberg, and his really comprehensive framework. Mintzberg basically set out to finally, definitively answer our opening question. But here's the kicker. He didn't want to just rely on what managers proudly claimed they did in surveys or what some outdated textbook said they should be doing. No. Back in the late 60s and 70s, Mintzberg went in and rigorously shadowed actual chief executives. He tracked their every single move, every phone call, every impromptu meeting, just to see what was actually happening in the trenches. And from that intense, real-world observation, he built a comprehensive framework to map out the reality on the ground. Through all that meticulous research, he distilled this swirling, chaotic job down into exactly 10 distinct managerial roles. Think of them as 10 different hats that a leader has to swap out, sometimes minute by minute, hour by hour. It's not just one single vague action called managing. It's performing 10 highly specific, easily recognizable functions to keep the whole organization moving forward.
Now, trying to juggle 10 separate roles in your head as a student of management is a bit overwhelming. So, Mintzberg brilliantly illustrates this by organizing those 10 roles into 3 distinct conceptual categories: interpersonal, informational, and decisional. Every single one of those 10 hats fits perfectly into one of these 3 slices. It basically takes the absolute madness of the workplace and gives us a really clean, easy-to-read map to navigate it.
Let's break down this rule of 3 framework a bit further to uncover those specific hats. First up, we have the interpersonal category. This is all about working with people, and it houses 3 roles. You've got the figurehead, who represents the team socially and does the ceremonial stuff. Then the leader, who's actively directing, hiring, and motivating the staff. And the liaison, who builds those vital outside networks. Next, we move to the informational category, where the manager acts kind of like the team's central nervous system. This means being a monitor, constantly scanning for relevant data, a disseminator, sharing that data internally, and a spokesperson, broadcasting important info to the outside world. Finally, we have the decisional category. This is where the buck stops and action is taken. It requires being an entrepreneur to drive innovation, a disturbance handler to step in and fix sudden crises, a resource allocator deciding who gets the budget or the time, and a negotiator representing the team's interests. So, 3 distinct categories encompassing 10 essential roles that a manager seamlessly transitions between every single day.
Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is looking at that nebulous expectation we talked about earlier. Just a giant, intimidating, undefined block labeled management. It's super vague, and honestly, it's pretty unhelpful if you're trying to learn or improve. But on the other side, when you look at the structured reality, breaking it down into interpersonal, informational, and decisional roles, the job suddenly becomes totally decipherable. It's not magic anymore.
It is a specific set of skills categorized into people, data, and choices. This contrast is exactly why Mintzberg's taxonomy was such a massive game changer. It literally replaces ambiguity with absolute clarity.
The crucial takeaway here is captured so beautifully in Mintzberg's own words. His entire framework is dedicated to, quote, understanding what managers actually do, not what we blindly hope they do, and certainly not what they might do in some perfect, frictionless world. When you realize that you aren't failing at one giant impossible task, but rather you're just rapidly shifting between being a liaison, a disturbance handler, and a resource allocator, well, everything just clicks into place. This taxonomy is a literal blueprint for everyday workplace reality. It helps us train managers better, support them better. And if we're managers ourselves, we can finally understand why our days feel so completely fragmented. We're just doing the job exactly as it was meant to be done.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a thought about your own workplace, or maybe even your own leadership journey. Of the three categories, interpersonal, informational, or decisional, which do you think is the most challenging for modern leaders today? Does the overwhelming tsunami of data in our digital age make the informational role the hardest to master? Does remote work make the interpersonal role tougher to maintain? Or do the incredibly fast-paced stakes of modern business make the decisional role the heaviest burden of all? Take a moment to really think about it and consider how Mintzberg's structured reality plays out in your own daily professional life. Until next time, keep learning, stay focused, and keep observing the structure behind the reality.